One soft voice, one fearless question, and a wave that shook the walls of power. You won't believe how one act of integrity sparked a fire no one saw coming. Press play to explore. What if a soft voice in the room refuses to be silenced when one question asked clearly and boldly shakes the walls constructed to keep power at ease? In a town where silence is sometimes better than truth, one woman decided neither, and in that decision, she ignited something no one expected. You've ever heard that it takes what? It takes to stand your ground when the price seems too steep to speak, not to be heard, but because to be silent is to lose yourself. This is the story of what followed, of integrity tested and the quiet strength that refused to bend. What happens when the First Lady gets called out for spending taxpayer money on lavish parties and her teenage son hits back by calling the police on a sitting congresswoman? Jasmine Crockett wasn't rattled. She didn't walk it back. She doubled down. You could feel the tension in the studio when she calmly said, if taxpayers are funding designer caviar and orchids from abroad while school lunch programs are being slashed, we have a right to question. She said it quietly, but it struck like a gavel. That instant aired live on Inside the Beltway was more than a policy jab. It was a blunt, straight-faced attack on First Lady Melania Trump, and the response was instantaneous. Even the host didn't anticipate it. He attempted to guide the interview back onto safer terrain. Congresswoman Crockett, are you suggesting that the First Lady is? She didn't allow him to complete the sentence. I'm not suggesting, she replied, her voice assertive yet calm. I'm saying we have looked at the records. There was no flinch, no increase in volume, no smirk. If the White House wishes to play dumb about it, they can. But let's not pretend this is new. No one stirred for a second. The studio was stuck there in that uncomfortable, tense silence. The camera lingered on her just a bit too long before going to commercial. In Dallas, her phone was buzzing nonstop. Texts, missed calls, news alerts. Her chief of staff, Avedi, was already waiting outside the studio when Jasmine emerged. Ava raised her phone with an expression. That clip's going viral. Some folks are losing their minds. You're trending. Jasmine gave a small, dry smile. Good. Maybe now they'll actually listen. Going viral didn't matter to her. What mattered was what wasn't being fixed, because this wasn't the first time they'd tried to sound the alarm. Jasmine and her team had spent months digging, oversight hearings, ignored letters, FOIA requests denied or delayed, but those categorized expense reports. They were constantly referencing Melania Trump's activities at Mar-a-Lago, elegant receptions, imported flower bouquets, private protection for unlisted visitors. It wasn't against the law, not really, but it had a whiff. Often Jasmine was never one to turn a nose up at a whiff. By the time she arrived home in her DC apartment, the clip had surpassed 2 million views. Conservative hosts labeled it a tacky attack. Some liberals cheered her courage, but most were measured. Melania Trump, after all, had stayed largely out of politics. Targeting this First Lady, it was a tightrope act. But Jasmine didn't care. Cable Watch Tonight aired the clip twice. One panelist, Ann, ex-press secretary, shook her head. I think she went too far. Another replied simply, she didn't lie. Intent is key. The first snapped, but on social media, the public wasn't discussing intent. They were fact-checking. Budget screenshots emerged. Twitter threads dissected how line items from federal reports corresponded to Mar-a-Lago catering receipts. It wasn't glamorous. It was dry, nuanced business, but Jasmine had told it in a way that stuck, plain, unapologetic, real. And people outside of politics were talking about it. Was it appropriate for Melania to use public funds for private parties? Why did Barron Trump's birthday bash cost so much? At midnight, Jasmine uploaded to Instagram. Public money belongs to the public. If that upsets you, ask yourself why. But the actual firestorm hadn't even begun. The next morning, Jasmine was drinking her second cup of coffee before halfway through it when her landline phone rang. Not her cell phone, her office phone. Ave answered it. Congresswoman Crockett's office. Yes, hold on, please. She turned to Jasmine, raising an eyebrow just a fraction. It's the DC Metro Police. They would like to talk to you personally. Jasmine didn't bat an eyelash. Put them through. She'd spoken to federal agents, cabinet members, once even a Supreme Court justice. But something on Ava's face caused her to hesitate. One extra moment. She lifted the phone. Representative Crockett. Good morning, ma'am. I'm Sergeant Duca with the D.C. Metropolitan Police. We had a report last evening, a harassment complaint brought against you. Jasmine blinked slowly. I'm sorry. What? Yes, ma'am. A complaint of harassment? The complainant is a Mr. Barron Trump. He alleges your televised remarks regarding his mother raised a security issue. Jasmine gazed at the distant wall silently. On the other end of the phone, Sergeant Duca went on softly. Let me just clarify, this isn't an official complaint, but due to who made the complaint, we were obligated to report it and alert your office. She was quiet for a moment. Wait, she said slowly. An 18-year-old made a police report over something I said in a TV interview. Duca hesitated. That's right, ma'am. Jasmine made a brief, dry laugh, more of skepticism than humor. All right, Sergeant, you got my statement. Anything else? No, ma'am. We'll close the report unless additional complaints are made. Sorry for the trouble. Click. She hung up without saying another word. Ava was already observing from across the room. What the hell was that? She demanded. Jasmine massaged her temple. Barron Trump, she grumbled. Complained because they said his mother hosts extravagant parties that can't be real. Ava said it is, and thanks to cop procedure, there's now a harassment report with my name circulating on their servers. Ava slowly sat down. Do you think he actually filed it, or was someone behind him? Jasmine didn't respond. She didn't need to. They both understood within the hour the leak occurred. A Texas political blog broke it first. Breaking: Barron Trump accuses Rep. Jasmine Crockett of harassment. They quoted law enforcement sources. It's most likely meant someone's cousin working nights sent a screenshot. By noon, the Daily Journal had it, then Capital Lens. Then it hit the entire conservative media wheel, and it was done. The headlines burst. On one show, a red-faced commentator shouted, "What sort of adult woman attacks the First Lady and gets her son to call the police? That is extremism." They omitted a few important facts, such as no one from Jasmine's staff had ever called the Trumps, that it was Barron who had called the police. Jasmine remained silent. She simply observed as the story turned and curved about her. She walked out of her Capitol Hill office at 1:15 p.m. A small group of reporters was already waiting. Jasmine didn't move, looked them in the eye, and said in a clear voice, "I have not once called the Trump family in any personal capacity. My comments were regarding a pattern of dubious spending that impacts the American taxpayer. That's part of my job." A reporter yelled, "Congresswoman, are you saying the Trump family retaliated?" She maintained her tone level. "I'm saying something that's true. When a sitting member of Congress speaks on publicly funded activity, that's not harassment, that's oversight." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't smile. "Are you going to apologize?" Another reporter screamed. Jasmine stared forward. "No, that needs to go out ASAP." Ava called out behind her, already typing up a press release. They had to get it live before the 2 p.m. news cycle could spin the story any tighter. But something was growing up quietly at first, and then suddenly they were everywhere. First in group messages, then on Instagram stories, then in comments on every news article, tweet, and YouTube video. It wasn't only political supporters. It was students, vets, women, teachers, people who didn't normally care about budget hearings or FOIA requests. Now they cared. Somewhere in the White House residence, someone had to tell her Melania Trump had to be informed. Her teenage son had made a harassment complaint against a congresswoman in office. The internet was already ablaze. By the time aides figured out the harm, it was too late. The internet had already weighed in. By 4 p.m., cable television became a circus. Split screens dominated the airwaves. On one side, Jasmine's press release. On the other, helicopter shots of Mar-a-Lago. And in the third frame, grainy old footage of Barron Trump from years ago. There hadn't been any recent material of him, but that didn't stop anchors from speculating. "We have no precedent for this," one anchor said. "On Capitol Circuit, a president's son calling the police over congressional oversight, uncharted territory." His co-host nodded, "And we've also never seen a congresswoman come at the First Lady like this." But audiences weren't swallowing the whole both sides narrative. They'd heard enough. Support for Jasmine boomed online. Individuals recorded her interview, reposting it with captions such as, "This is harassment. Seriously, imagine calling the cops over this." Then something else emerged. A hazy video taken from a staffer's account at Mar-a-Lago appeared, where there was a champagne reception. Nam Marna Shivichin. Melania walked past an ice sculpture of a bald eagle. The timestamp, it matched perfectly with one of the highlighted expense reports Jasmine had pointed out weeks before. It didn't confirm everything, but it was enough to make people talk, and on TikTok, the moment went viral. TikTok users stitched Jasmine's quote with school budget cut headlines. The juxtaposition was swift and harsh. Clips continued to circulate. Some were stitched with housing insecurity statistics. Others combined Jasmine's interview with school lunch cut headlines. But nearly each and every one of them ended the same way, and they called the police on her. In the office, Eva called in. Media calls are coming in one after another. The View wants you, and some Milwaukee podcast. And a candle store in Ohio sent you a gift basket. Yuge's mind cracked a tiny smile. Tell them thank you for the lavender. But beneath her calm, she felt it. The pace, the pressure. Everything was moving too fast, and she knew better than to celebrate early. That evening, her phone buzzed again. It was Charles Drummond, an old-school civil rights attorney out of Baltimore. He rarely called. When he did, it mattered. "You know you're being targeted, right?" he said. "No hello, no preamble." I figured Jasmine replied. This wasn't about embarrassment. It was a bull at a gate tactic, the kind designed to shake the nerves and make a withdrawal. If you had freaked out, Charles told her, spun and deleted your post, or apologized, they would have spun it as culpability. She settled back in her chair, silent. "But you didn't," he said. And now they overplayed. They made a policy disagreement into a personal war. That was Charles, quick, uncomplicated, and always slicing through the din. And at the moment, she needed that focus. "So, should I be concerned?" she asked. "No," Charles replied without hesitation. "You should be louder." She exhaled long, slow breaths. That evening, she didn't hide. She activated her phone camera. No glam, no crew, just Jasmine sitting in her apartment, addressing the camera to everyone who was watching. If raising questions about government expenditure is now a crime, then we've already lost the thread of democracy. She let the silence hang just long enough to hurt, then she uploaded it and slept. It had more than 4 million views by morning. Mainstream media was still tiptoeing, trying to remain tactful while reporting a political debacle. But everyday citizens were not mincing words. She called out the grift. They called the cops. A hashtag started in a back of the thread comment stream lost beneath her video. #Stand with Crockett. By midday, it was everywhere. Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, even on Facebook groups typically filled with only school-baked sales and rescued dogs. Support came from all directions. Celebrities reposted it. Teachers' unions made statements. Grassroots organizers mobilized. Even a couple of black veterans on X began posting their military records with the title, "We fought for this country. She's fighting for its truth." And yet, the White House said nothing, not even a single official statement. In Jasmine's office, a vapor her head in. BuzzFeed is asking for comment. Ness also. "Oh, and some woman from Kansas mailed you a quilt. Your name's embroidered right by Shirley Chisholm's." Jasmine smiled. "Don't let me become merchandise." Ava grinned. Too late, but not everyone was cheering. Behind closed doors, power players were already regrouping, trying to understand how one sentence on a live interview had kicked off a national reckoning, and they weren't about to let it keep growing. By Friday, Jasmine had had enough. She wasn't going to let cable, spin, and social media noise decide how the truth got told. She wanted facts raw, complete, and unfiltered. "We're releasing everything," she told Ava. "Full transparency. No summaries, just evidence." Ava blinked. "That's gonna make some people very uncomfortable." Jasmine didn't hesitate. Good. They should be. That afternoon, her staff released it, a downloadable PDF on the congressional website, expense records tied to the office of the First Lady, reviewed by the Oversight Subcommittee. It contained seed redacted receipts, itemized invoices, internal memos from 2 previous fiscal quarters. It was dry reading, but it told a damning tale. One invoice for $137,000 marked decorative floral ambiance for a single Mar-a-Lago event. Another billed $9,400 for spa treatments ordered specially for non-staff guests. Hidden deep in the document, a memo from a low-level staffer sublimely cautioned some charges could arouse public suspicion if examined carefully. Jasmine highlighted it in red, screenshots it, and retweeted to Twitter. They knew. And then came the actual hammer. Her office dropped a complete phone and text record of both her official numbers and personal cell, 48 hours prior to and after the interview. No calls, no texts, no emails to and from the Trump clan, their lawyers, or the White House. "Let's be clear," Jasmine said in a fresh video post. "There was no contact, no private message, no campaign to harass. I did my job openly, in public." What came after was a concerted effort to smear and intimidate. Then she turned to the camera. Her voice didn't tremble. "And I won't play along," Charles Drummond observed from Baltimore. He phoned Avea right away. "That woman has steel in her backbone." Nava looked over into the room at Jasmine. "She's exhausted," she said, "but she's not going away." The press couldn't avoid the receipts. And then hosted a government accountability specialist who went line by line through Jasmine's documents. "This is not napkin math," he said. "These are significant public expenditures." With no apparent explanation. If anything, Congresswoman Crockett's oversight is what's supposed to happen. Conservative media panicked in the meantime. Some attempted to spin it, others attempted to hide it, a few did something entirely different. Some pundits attempted a spin reboot. "Do Americans even care if Melania wants to have a nice party?" one anchor rhetorically asked. In the comments, someone replied, "For all of us. Yeah, with our money. We care that evening." Jasmine was at home, legs under her on the sofa. Television was turned down. Her phone was in front of her. She read through messages from an instructor in Arizona, a healthcare worker in Ohio, a former Marine in Florida. They weren't political messages. They were personal. Thank you. Thank you for standing up, for not letting it go. And then she saw her favorite. A teen girl in Iowa had sent I didn't realize congresswomen could do that. Thank you for not being afraid. Jasmine smiled kindly. But before she could take a full breath, her phone vibrated again. A text from Evady. Call me as soon as possible. You won't like this. Jasmine called it once. What now? Ava sounded strained. Someone released a partial internal memo from the First Lady's office to a blog. They're saying you have a personal grudge against Melania. And then came the punchline, and they're suggesting the reason is race. There it was. Jasmine didn't scream, she didn't fulminate, so she said calmly, they're going low. Ava let out a deep breath on the other end, and you know what that means. Jasmine opened her laptop. Yes, it means we go even higher, because when they couldn't beat her, they attempted to bring her down. By Saturday morning, Jasmine Crockett wasn't merely a trending news headline. She'd become the face of something much larger, a cultural flashpoint, a reckoning. What began as a biting budget critique had detonated. The memo never mentioned Jasmine, but the phrasing spoke volumes. Aggressively targeting traditional institutions, lacking decorum. Nobody needed a decoder ring. People knew exactly what those words conveyed, and the internet wasn't having it either. Supporters didn't just rally behind Jasmine, they championed her. Videos surfaced everywhere. Cutaways of Anita Hill side by side with Jasmine's interview. Montages of Shirley Chisholm's speeches cut with Jasmine. As press moments on TikTok, a former social worker in Tulsa sat in her car and filmed a raw, unfiltered take. She said what we've all been thinking, and now they're calling the cops on her. For what? Doing her job while black. That single video hit over 800,000 likes in half a day. Inside Jasmine's office, the pace was relentless. Nava's team had doubled overnight. Volunteers, interns, staffers sorting DMS, fielding interviews, organizing support. One email came from Pastor Roland Jeff in Sacramento. Short and clears. Tell Congresswoman Crockett our church is praying for her strength. We've got her back all the way. Through it all, Jasmine never played the victim. She didn't have to. Instead, she posted a 14-second video. I was elected to ask questions, to speak when others whisper. That work doesn't just cease because someone's uncomfortable. That tweet was retweeted more than 20,000 times within a single afternoon. Then the cracks began to appear on the other side. Tentatively first, then more loudly. Anonymous sources within the Trump camp began to whisper, then leak. A leading columnist tweeted out a series of tweets speculating Barron's complaint might have been submitted without complete legal scrutiny. Others claimed staff scrambled to manage the optics of Melania's involvement. Then came the screenshot of the leaked group chat between campaign advisors. We should have ignored her. This is getting out of hand. In Jasmine's apartment, the mood was calm but reserved. Ava presented a tablet. You've been invited to give a speech at the University of Michigan. GE as well. And two national women's orgs would have you keynote their fall conferences. Jasmine looked at the screen. This wasn't the plan, she said softly, not resentful, just truthful. I know, Ava said, but you struck something real. People don't crave polish, they crave truth. Outside, small groups were gathering, not angry mobs, just folks with signs. Truth isn't harassment. Questioning power isn't a crime. We see you, Jasmine. In Philadelphia, a muralist began painting Jasmine's face alongside. Her quote, public funds are for the public. If that offends you, ask yourself why. By the end of the weekend, the mural would make local news. TV anchors began losing control of the story. They scrambled to shift tone, reshape talking points, but the audience had moved on. One veteran journalist said it plain during a panel, whatever side you. Inbreded Haverhundefation Olive Teclais over a congressional inquiry is weird. This isn't just politics anymore. It's about behavior. Meanwhile, the Trumper machine fell silent. No more explanation of the complaint. No more identification of Jasmine. Spurs circulated. Barron had been told to vanish. No comments, no interviews, nothing. Because the harm was already inflicted. But whereas their side pulled back, Jasmine's extent only expanded. Behind the closed doors of the East Wing of the White House, it was a tense atmosphere. Melania Trump stood by the tall, windows in her personal office, arms folded. Her expression was inscrutable. Behind the door, muted voices argued over what to do next. Her chief of staff, Annetta Kohler, opened the door slowly. We've written a statement, she said cautiously, but she hesitated. It's a risk. Anything we put out now could stoke the story again. Annetta Kohler remained motionless, memo in her hand. Melania didn't move. I told him not to respond. Annetta nodded quietly. He's young. He thought he was defending you. Melania snapped. Defending me from what? A congresswoman asking questions. The room went quiet. Within Trump circles, panic had set in. Donors were calling. Senate allies were nervous. One even whispered about retreating from the situation entirely. The issue wasn't Jasmine's attitude, it was the receipts. Each time a spokesperson attempted to spin, another reporter waved an expense line. What about $23,000 for crystal table settings? Why did $17,000 get spent on a gelato bar? No responses. The budget office had no comment. The ethics committee initiated a low-key investigation, and each fruitless damage control effort only served to make Jasmine more resilient. In the home Barron had fallen into, total radio silence to someone familiar with the family. He hadn't anticipated it to blow up like this. He believed he was being faithful. Instead, the media made him a joke. On Reddit, there was already a viral fake account of his lawyer. On Instagram, memes abounded. Barron Trump, the only teen who calls 911 over budget oversight. Behind closed doors, Melania seethed, but not at Jasmine, not even at the press. This was avoidable. She gritted through her teeth. They made her look honest, principled, and Netta muttered under her breath, loudly enough to be sure she heard it herself. She is honest. In D.C. Jasmine remained steadfast. She wasn't paying attention to whether Barron regretted anything. She wasn't seeking apologies or headlines. She cared about accountability, and the pressure behind the White House doors was spilling out. A senior staffer from Melania's office abruptly resigned. Another was shuffled into a minor advisory role in the Midwest. Routine shifts, the official statement said. No one believed it. Charles Drummond called again. You've got them rattled. Jasmine leaned on her desk, calm but sharp. I don't care about rattling, she said. I care about consequences. Exactly, Charles said. And now you've created a moment where people are finally paying attention. Don't let up. I'm not planning to. Later that day, a new leak hit. An unnamed aide shared an internal memo showing Melania's office had warned Barron not to respond after the interview. The memo read, we advised against response. Exposure risk is high, outcome unpredictable. The public saw it clearly, thinly disguised remorse. The not-so-faint attempt to deflect blame to an 18-year-old. But Jasmine didn't react. She had work to do. A watchdog organization had just published additional documents. Jasmine read through them. One jumped out, a reimbursement request for a private party thrown by a European jewelry company held within Mar-a-Lago's ballroom. The bill, made out to the office of the First Lady. Ava looked up from the file. Worse than we imagined. Jasmine didn't blink. Then we moved forward. This was not about a single party, or a single budget, or a single bad grievance. It was about a trend power covering its own and chastening those who dared to question. The public could spot it. Jasmine knew it, and behind the White House walls, they were afraid of it. Not because she yelled, but because she wouldn't turn back, and neither would the people standing behind her. Everything changed by midweek. The House Oversight Committee called for a special audit of all non-essential spending connected to the First Lady's office. Quietly, officially, but it was seismic. Jasmine saw the news crawl along the bottom of her office television. Ava stood next to her, arms folded, face tight. You goaded them, she said. Now they're forced to react. Jasmine nodded. They can't keep acting that this is about bruised feelings. Newsrooms nationwide snapped to life. Large outlets started going through Trump-era budgets from years past. Small outlets dug up forgotten pieces and spending flags that had previously been ignored. Only now, of course, was anybody listening. A Sacramento Review reporter dug up a $44,000 invoice for private, sent coordination at one 2022 gala. Another publication discovered luxury car rentals, Lamborghinis, Bentleys, listed as VIP transport, and the events. Many did not even involve official White House personnel. Lavish doesn't even begin to describe it, said a shocked news anchor. If this was corporate money, somebody would have lost their job. Throughout it all, Jasmine remained centered. No name-calling, no snide jabs. She maintained it cutting, biting, and always mission-focused. That discipline only served to strengthen her. She wasn't seeking drama. She was calling for accountability, and the nation took notice. In Milwaukee, retired postal employees initiated a letter-writing campaign to Congress. They dubbed it the People's Oversight. In Little Rock, university students conducted a teach-in on federal spending and ethics. One of the speakers closed with Jasmine's now famous words, "Public money is not private property." And while the flames consumed her, Melania vanished. No tweets, no statements, no appearances. The silence was resounding, but others couldn't remain silent. Congressman Hall Vernon, a veteran Republican, went live and muddled through a half-hearted explanation. So what if there were a few parties? Washington's always been about tradition and ceremony. TikTok leapt into action. Did he just say? Tradition is worth $137,000 in orchids. Even right-wing voters started inching uncomfortably, not because of ideology, because it began to feel familiar. I'm a working mom. One caller told a Midwest radio show, if I use company money for a spa day, I'd be fired. So why is this different a week later? Jasmine was officially called to testify. She was eager to agree. Ava's team went into high gear, closed door preparation, expected questions, complete examination of every document. They were taking no chances. This isn't a hearing, Eva said one evening. Still in the office, Jasmine glanced up from her notes. Calm, this is the moment. Jasmine rested her head back on the seat, eyes shut, not tired, grounded. No applause in this silence, no breaking news crawl. Just the heaviness of having spoken exactly what needed to be said, exactly the way it was needed to be heard. Ava looked over. All right. Jasmine nodded, her tone gentle but firm. Yeah, for the first time in a while. Yeah. The video of her speech at Harry's. Stowe was all over the place by evening. It wasn't scripted. It wasn't spiffed up. It was truth. No cuts. No overlays. Just a camera in someone's hand capturing Jasmine Crockett speaking the truth as always. But this time, the world was listening at last. The headline, she said what we were all thinking. Midnight, it had exceeded 2 million views. Teachers were streaming it in classrooms. A women's group in Atlanta held a watch party. A bookstore in Mendez created a window display with a printed quote, questioning power isn't disrespect, it's responsibility. But even then, Jasmine knew the fight wasn't done. There would be further headlines, further pushback, further people who wanted her to fold. But she also realized that they'd misjudged the strength of the public when it's paying attention. They'd misjudged the strength of one voice that won't be silenced on a late-night strategy session. Charles Drummond put it succinctly, you didn't just hold them to account, you reminded people they could too. And in living rooms all over the country, that's exactly what was happening. A Detroit community center began a civic budgeting class using Jasmine's papers as a model case study. A Des Moines librarian created a TikTok discussing congressional oversight with Jasmine's hearing video in the background. A Brooklyn teenager launched a page named Teens for Transparency, its debut posting. If Congresswoman Crockett can ask the hard questions, so can we. So within the Capitol, the ripple effect touched even the most cynical quarters. A Pennsylvania junior rep asked for a discretionary office funds review. A senator with a safe, playing reputation quietly sponsored a bipartisan bill about fiscal disclosure. And as the opposition was still struggling to grasp narratives, Jasmine had set her sights higher as legacy. Not fame, not brand, but example. One evening, weeks on, she sat on her apartment balcony with a mug of tea. DC thrummed in the distance. Ava messaged her a new story. The title said, Jasmine Crockett didn't start a movement. She reminded us we already had one. Jasmine grinned, not because it was complimentary, but because it was accurate. She didn't light the fuse. She just declined to put it out. And in declining to do so, everything shifted. Sometimes the most difficult thing isn't speaking out, it's remaining true to yourself afterward. In Jasmine's case, we weren't merely witnessing a political moment, we were witnessing a woman standing firm with quiet bravery, even when it would have been simpler to shrink. And perhaps that's something we all get in some way. Whether it's in a crowded room or the quiet of our own lives, there comes a time when we're called to choose comfort or conscience. Such stories remind us strength doesn't always roar. At times, it stands and speaks simply, relying on the truth to make its weight known. And in a world that too often celebrates noise, perhaps what we need more of is grace in the fire. Perhaps it's worth asking ourselves, what would we still stand for if we stood alone?